J'ai fait c'était une keynote du PDF de sa place. Oui, c'est déjà.
Voilà. Merci. Excuse-moi, je ne vais pas te rappeler ça en plus. Désolée. Est-ce que vous avez besoin de... Écoutez, là, a priori, sinon, pour la... si jamais il y a des choses qui viennent à la pause, vous me dites et moi ça je vois comme ça, si je descends la fiche. Parfait. Écoutez, bonne une colloque. À tout à l'heure.
Oui. C'est gentil. Vous voulez? Oui, vous l'avez. Ok, d'accord. Ok.
Good morning and welcome for this second day of our colloquium. I will present you shortly our next chairman for this morning. I think a lot of you know who is it, but maybe for the remote public. So the next chairman will be Professor Osman Boparechi, Numata Professor of Central and South Asian Art and Archaeology at the UC Berkeley, and Emeritus Director of Research at the CNRS Paris. Professor Boparechi is a numismat, a historian and archaeologist. He is the author of 16 books, 6 exhibition catalogs, editor of 6 volumes, and the author of 152 research articles. He has read 102 papers at international conferences, given 311 talks at 157 universities and museums around the world, and he carried out archaeological missions in 29 different countries. So please welcome our chairman, Professor Osmund Boparachi. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arnaud. Je vais d'abord parler en langue de Molière pour remercier des organisateurs de ce colloque, professeur Guillaume Ducœur et puis Céline Rodard, également Alexandra, Arnaud et Videgui. C'est fabuleux d'être avec les jeunes chercheurs, très prometteurs. So today we have a very, it's quite exhaustive program, so I will kindly ask everyone to limit their papers to 20 minutes. I know you have a lot to say, but still to giving the priority to everyone and also have a wonderful series of questions, please limit to 20, and I'm going to stop at the 20th minute. Okay, so our today's first speaker is Birgit Angelika Schmidt. I don't know whether I should read this because I know Birgit for a long time, and I'm very much interested in her work. So she told me she has just finished the PhD thesis and going to submit it, and she has been working mainly on the Kucha collection in the Asian Art Museum, which was in Dalam, now in of course, the reserve collection is still in Dalam, but working also in the Humboldt Forum. So I like her methodologies, as I said yesterday, after Monica's and also Angela and Julia. So we can have a discussion about the techniques of fabrication of sculptures. So it's to you, Birgit.
Yeah, you can hear me, or should I come closer? It's okay, I think. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for this kind introduction, Professor Boparachi. So I want to share my findings on Buddhist monastery sites, or namely their architectural elements, such as sculptures, most of them reliefs and wall paintings, which were located east of your research field in the autonomous region of Xinjiang. Dating between the 3rd century CE until 11th century CE. It's quite wide. So this is a view into the permanent exhibition of the Museum für Asiatische Kunst in Berlin, where most of them are located nowadays. So I think the parallels regarding artistic style are somehow obvious. But artistic style has little been investigated through the lens of technical analysis or processes of production. But I think that's a very good way to better illuminate the connections and artistic exchange between our regions of interest. So here we see the routes of various expeditions along the Silk Roads at the beginning of the 20th century, and they I think explain why a large number of objects can be found in different collections worldwide. There was, can you see my cursor? Yeah, so there was a lot of traffic along this northern edge of the Taklamakan Desert. The German expeditions, altogether 4, marked in orange, worked here between 1902 and 1914. And this map documents their archaeological sites of interest. The Germans and also the French Paul Pelliot expedition, they worked a lot in Tumshuk. Then there is this large region of Kucha. In the magnifications you can see the different archaeological sites of interest. I think Kizil is for sure one of the most famous. Then there is this very interesting region of Karashar with the archaeological site of Shorchuk or Shikshin, as the Russians called it, and also Aurel Stein was working there quite a long time. And in the east there is the region of Turfan with a very famous city of Kocho. So cemetery rocks are describing the northern edge of the Taklamakan Desert. So this poor rock quality, or the rock has such a poor quality that is not suitable for construction material. So therefore a rock cut architecture as Kizil, which is shown here, is very often found, but important to say is that only spaces were fully documented, decorated with wall paintings and sculptures which were used for ritual ritual practices. And for the region of Kucha, I can clearly state that there are only 3 types of caves used for that purpose. One I'll show you here is a so-called central pillar cave. Another cave type is a so-called monumental image cave with, instead of the niche, there is a monumental Buddha statue. And the third type is just a simple square cave where you can also find statues and wall paintings. But next to cave architecture, there was also surface architecture, such as stupas with a comparable layout regarding the floor plans, made of adobe bricks and rammed earth. The largest complex is Kocho in the Turfan region, and in addition to man-made destruction and devastation, the natural decay or the natural weathering of clay is also noticeable, as documented here by these 2 images, which were taken more than 100 years apart. So based on this geological map I show you here, it can be summarized that the geological formations do not allow many variations in regard to the manufacturing techniques. So these geological materials here are mixtures composed of weathering products, and they form the most common geological formation in these regions. So one of the main challenges in studying these objects is their fragmentary state and their lost architectural contexts. So already at the time of their rediscovery, there were only traces of the former installation left on the walls of the cave architecture, and the objects were laid scattered on the ground without any connection to the architecture anymore. So they were somewhat more organized here in the storage in Berlin, and unlike the wall painting, unlike the sculptures, the wall painting fragments which were detached during the expeditions, they have an kind of architectural and archaeological context, which is of course easier to reconstruct compared with scattered fragments of sculptures. So here on the right you can see a fully reconstructed cave from Kizil with the original wall paintings integrated. And this cave is surrounded by statues, or the fragments of statues, and this is all on display now in the permanent exhibition in Berlin. And the sculptures that has to be added, I think it's important, they are for the first time on display. So in the exhibition planning, we were able to group the sculptural fragments based on their archaeological finding site and displayed them in this very dense manner. And I had the great opportunity to support the curator at that time, Lila Russell-Smith, and also started my research for my doctoral thesis on the collection of around 700 clay-based sculptural fragments, which made it important to perform a first inventory based on different criteria. So such as, for example, a simple classification by type and category of the objects. This is sometimes very difficult when you deal with fragments, so I developed a very easy method which just distinguishes between heads and bodies, and then got more specific when or if it was possible. And becoming more specific means asking, of course, art historians like Monika Zinn and her research group for advice. So the presence or the dominance of mainly heads that survived became very, very obvious. More than half of the collection is hats. And next to the iconographic types, classification or grouping according to size class was also important. So here I divided the objects into 4 size categories, always relating them to their missing bodies or heads. And here are a few more examples from the Berlin collection. So for this size classification, I consulted in detail with colleagues in China who studied these installation marks, which can sometimes be used to reconstruct the size of the figures. Here is a sketch or an example from one of the monumental image caves in the Kucha region. So due to the large number of objects and their classification by different criteria and groups, I was able to conduct kind of simple cluster analysis. And this is also like the basic idea of my thesis. So by considering the material itself as an important source of information, local patterns within local workshops can be identified and compared, so that trans-regional connections regarding the production and the workshops of these sculptures can be explored in the long term. And this was done by using relatively little instrumental analysis. For identifying the materials, simple visual observations were already very insightful. And in terms of manufacturing techniques, such as the internal support, mainly the backside of the objects are of interest. But however, as shown here on the left, the reality is often hidden due to the past conservation treatments. So objects like the one on the right, where you can get an idea of the internal support, are rather rare in the collection. Optical microscopy was a very useful tool used for the examination of the aggregates in the clay mortars, and tensional temper, such as organic matters, is often typical for specific archaeological sites. For instance, Bristol animal hair, as shown here on the top left, is mainly found only in Kizil in the Kucha region, for example. And in addition to the clay objects, Berlin has a comparable large collection of around 30 gypsum molds, mainly from the archaeological site of Shortjuk. And here is an extract from my object catalogue, which is in the appendix of my thesis. And it includes all the sculptural fragments in Berlin, also those which are lost after World War II. And for each object, a selection of technical information is added using these little icons here, and giving here a short description. I was allowed to perform X-ray diffraction, and I obtained a very typical spectrum for gypsum. I was allowed to do XRD on the one of the molds. So all of them are gypsum-based. Gypsum is the binding agent with a very high content of quartz sands. And here in the magnification, you can see these black inclusions that indicate the firing, that maybe indicate the firing of the natural gypsum stone. So in addition to the scientific examination of the originals, I did a copy of a mold to perform casting experiments. The observations from these practical experiments, as well as literature research, have led me to some conclusions regarding the use of molds, specifically in relation to the heads. So it became clear that molds played a very important role in the manufacturing process. Facial features, unlike in wall paintings, did not change a lot over hundreds of kilometers or even centuries, I dare to say. So on the left you see a hat in the Gumé, it's from the Kucha region. It's dated to the early 6th century CE. And on the right, you can see a hat from Kocho, dated to the late 7th century CE. So parts or sections were molded and were combined with freehand modeling, and this allowed a wide range of variations. And it seems probable that the hats up from a certain size, such as life size, were molded and modeled almost in the round and separately from the in situ modeled bodies, and then attached to the torso in a second step. The hats of the life-size figures typically consist of a clay core and a kind of shell of a face cast in a mold, and already described by Varma, Professor Tarzi, and Middleton and Jill, I think, for the collection at the British Museum. Discussing the internal armature connecting the hat to the torso would require a separate lecture, so I go ahead. So for the casting method, I assumed that it was a kind of slip casting. This idea is based on my experiments and observations on the objects in Berlin. So clay in an almost liquid consistency was first poured into the mold to achieve such thin layers as they can be seen here. And I often observed, especially in the faces of the collection, these super slim layers. So here is an example of a hat without or with a lost paint layer, but I think what is very obvious is the painting ground, this white layer you can see here. Based on technical analysis we performed on some of the wall painting fragments in the Berlin collection, I can clearly state that these ground layers on the wall paintings as well as on the sculptures are mainly gypsum-based plasters. Deposits of gypsum are relatively available all over Central Asia, and it is also possible that there are minor components of calcite inside, but the binding agent is gypsum. So there is no such thing as a fresco along the northern edge of the Taklamakan. The paint layers are always applied on dry ground along the northern Silk Road. That's something I can clearly state. And I normally try to avoid terms like secco or fresco for Central Asian painting techniques, but that's a more political issue, I think. So this brings us to the subject of paint layers. Again, I refer to our results on the wall painting. We conducted some analysis regarding the pigments. They are often naturally occurring, mineral-based. No tests were performed to analyze the binding agents. It's very complicated with organic binding agents, and all of the fragments in Berlin have this very ugly synthetic binder from past conservation treatments on the surface. So it's getting very tricky to do an interpretation when you try to identify organic material. But based on literature or comparable studies, the binder could be an animal glue such as oxide or sometimes plant gum too. Here is a list of some of the natural occurring minerals. I don't go into detail. Lapis lazuli is the only pigment which was imported. The others are locally occurring. So there's a lot of existing literature on the subject of painting techniques. I can recommend for Bamiyan the studies of Marin Kot and Yoko Taniguchi on the techniques. What I want to point out with this slide is the connection between wall paintings and sculptural reliefs. So all of the fragments shown here belong to one and the same cave, so I think it's obvious that they share the same color scheme. Wall paintings and sculptures were created simultaneously and relate to each other not only based on their content, but also in terms of production techniques, as their composition is almost identical. To illustrate that, here's a schematic structure of a wall painting consisting of a support, followed by coarse layers made of clay mixed with sand, a straw, fine plasters made of pure clay, the ground layer and the paint layer, and we can identify an almost identical structure on the sculptures above a certain figure size. An internal support or anchoring devices were necessary. These were wrapped in reeds and tied around with ropes, as can be seen here on the right, and sometimes only made out of straw bundles, and as documented here for Shorchuk by the Russian expedition, and again followed by different layers of coarse plaster. I would rather call it mortar because it's very thick. And based on technical understanding, I assume that before applying the first fine layer of pure clay, the heads and very often the hands, which were mold made, were attached. So subsequently the ground layer and the paint layers were applied. So just an example to underline this idea. This is Beshbalik, a very important city during the Tang dynasty and also under the Uyghur Khanate until the 9th century. It's one of the few archaeological sites with Buddhist clay-based sculptures left in situ and anchored on with the surface architecture. So I chose this example to underline this somehow seamless transition from the two-dimensional wall to the three-dimensional sculpture, to emphasize this connection. 2 more minutes and 2 more slides. So if it comes to a comparison with Greater Gandhara, I want to highlight the following initial observations. However, I'm convinced there's so much more to discover. So due to the geological situation, there is a relatively limited choice of building materials along the northern Silk Road, and accordingly, the techniques are also limited. A deliberate choice regarding the materials and techniques, as Alexandra postulated that for Hada in connection with the hats, I remember, does not exist in my study area. So the clay-based sculptures of Greater Gandhara, depending on the size, show clay cores or no clay cores, but various types of plasters or mortars are used. They include gypsum compounds and calcite compounds in different mixing proportions with a wide range of aggregates or a temper that cannot be pressed into fixed rules. In the regions of Greater Gandhara, the energy-intensive process of lime calcination or lime firing was practiced. This process requires a significant amount of fuel and sustained temperatures of over 1,000 degrees for several days. Such a processing cannot be proven along the northern Silk Road, but gypsum was fired there because the temperatures for firing gypsum are around 150 degrees. So it was cheaper, it was available, and this is why it was common along the northern edges. So due to the poor quality of the rock, one more minute. The poor quality of the stone along the edge of the Taklamakan sculpting was not feasible, leading to limitations in the height or depth size of the statue. So only a maximum of 15 meters was documented in the Kucha region. So the core or the basic shape of the giant Buddhas of Bamiyan was carved out of the cliffs, and in the next step plastered with clay layers. On the right, you can see a monumental image cave from the Kucha region where the Buddha image was built up by modeling only. So to sum up, in addition to the parallels regarding the artistic style, there are also impressively many parallels in terms of techniques between our regions, particularly regarding the modeling techniques. The knowledge must have traveled for sure along the Silk Roads, but based on my, or on the material evidence, I can clearly prove the use of molds along the Silk Road, the Northern Silk Road, and the existence of a casting tradition for clay-based sculptures along both the northern and also the southern Silk Roads. This is an example from the southern Silk Road. So for Gandhara, and based on my knowledge so far, there are only a few molds, and all of them quite small. So such as the one in the upper corner, I think Angela showed it yesterday too, from Professor Tarzi. So for the Buddhist monasteries along the Northern Silk Road, I strongly support the idea, namely that each monastery had its own workshop and their own molds. And in the course of my cluster analysis and with regard to local workshops, it became evident that there are more technical similarities than differences between the different archaeological sites. So I hope my detailed description, especially for the casting techniques, will bring up new ideas to your research field. And I thank you very much for your attention. This is a 3D scan from one of our objects, and hope there is sufficient time for discussion. Yes. Thank you so much. It's like running. Minutes too late.
Yeah, thank you very much, Birgit. Sorry for stopping you, because just give the chance to the others. Yeah, I don't want to monopolize the discussion. There are certain things that emerges from your paper. One is the existence of local workshops and trans-regional connections, use of molds, moldings, and also the role that played by the gypsum or the lime, the surface. So these were the questions that we raised last time. So first, Alexandra and then Olivier.
Thank you very much, Birgit, for this fascinating presentation. I am deeply interested in the connection and artistic exchanges between our region, and I would like to hear more about what you just said about the molds you find that allowing to foresee local workshops. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I just showed the molds in the Berlin collection because we have a comparable huge amount of molds. The other expeditions, for example, the Russian ones, have also found molds in the Kucha region, because I think even before I started with my study, there was this idea in the museum in Berlin, or the researchers shared this idea that because of the fact that all of these molds were found in the Karashar region, which is like in the center of the Northern Silk Road, there was this idea that there was the workshop and it delivered to the different oasis sites. And during my research, I found out that there are some, not as many as in Berlin, but for example, there are molds at the British Museum, there are molds in the Eremitage in St. Petersburg, and they belong to different finding sites, and they also look different. And I didn't mention this during my presentation, but comparable small mold, just to cast the shell of a face. It's many kgs heavy. So in all of these molds is quartz sand. Gypsum is locally available everywhere. So from a practical perspective, there is no need to transfer or transport the molds. Because the artisans or the monks, whoever was working in the creation of these objects, they knew their material, they knew their technique. So I totally agree with the idea that the ideas were traveling, but not the molds. Maybe I show you, or I remember we discussed this hats I showed you from the GUME and the museum in Berlin. it's a pity now because I showed it from the side, but they look comparable, identical. And maybe I show you another, but no, let's stick to this example. There are so many small differences that they are not made out of one and the same mold. And as soon as you get a bit more familiar with the material clay is shrinking. So, and there is another subject I didn't even dare to open today. This is the idea of that some parts or some, especially those made of molds, were maybe fired. And then there's again shrinking of the material. So they do not belong to one and the same mold. And imagine that the objects, the clay sculptures were traveled, doesn't make sense from a material perspective. And then we can also ask, how is it possible that, for example, in Dunhuang, we see the same drapery of folds? I mean, this is like based on the gypsum molds. I stick to this idea of local workshops. But hey.
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, congratulations on the work you've been doing. This is really fascinating and exciting, so congrats. I just have a question about the chronology. I'm wondering how early you can get up in the chronology based on the different sites and statues that you show. I see 7th century CE with Kocho. Yeah. I'm just wondering about the other sites.
It's very wide. I told you the absolute and the relative dating. There's a lot based on art history. For example, we did some C14 sampling on some of the objects, and the art historians were like, oh my God, the whole chronology doesn't make sense anymore. So it is very, very difficult. So I had these discussions with a group of Monica Zinn too. This is the first step working with these objects. So I really decided to keep out the dating out of my work at present, because really this is just the beginning. I start with this inventory. I really hope that we can go further, but it's such a sensitive, difficult theme that I really try to avoid it. I think it's important to have this huge amount of objects, so grouping is possible, because when I remember the conversation we had yesterday, I think Berlin is in this very advantaged situation that there is such a huge amount of objects. So next to that, or I think my way regarding the materials and the techniques is just another perspective. And I think in the interdisciplinary dialogue with art historians or archaeologists and other colleagues, we can go further and discuss chronology and dating. So it's a very wide range. We say from the 3rd until the 11th century.
Okay,
because we also have this Uyghur period, and it's...
I'm sorry to stop this, because I have to continue with the second paper, because it's almost the time out. Thank you so much, Birgit.
I gave too long answers, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much, Birgit, for
listening.
So now I welcome Dr. SatoshiNAIKI. Serves as Associate Professor at the School of Japanese Studies, Aichi Prefectural University. Satoshi, you have changed your university, right? Since last time I saw you. So his research specializes in the artistic traditions and carving techniques of Gandhāran sculptures, with particular emphasis of those originating from the sites of Tareli and Ranighat in the Peshawar Basin. So he'll be talking to us on the artisans in Gandhāran and Nagaraha, trial comparative studies of sculptures between Mekhasanda and Had.
Good morning. My name is SatoshiNAIKI. I'm from Aichi Prefectural University in Japan. First of all, I'd like to express my gratitude, sincere gratitude to organizer of this colloquium, Professor Juiram Ducour and Dr. Alejandro GallegoLOPEZandGilSTEIN. I'm sorry if my pronunciation is not correct. And to invite me to this wonderful colloquium. I feel really honored to be here in the gorgeous scholars. And also thank you very much for your I'm sorry. Thank you. The topic I would like to talk today is Artisans in Gandhāran and Nagaraha, a trial comparative studies of sculptures between Mekhasanda and Had. Actually, today's topic is based on analysis that I did when I was a master student in 2009, about 15 years ago. At that time, I could not have reached to a satisfactory conclusion from my inexperienced analysis, but in this colloquium, there are many scholars who have wealthy knowledge about archaeology in Nagaraha region and sculptures unearthed in Had sites. So there is a possibility that some information might be helpful to understand the artisans of sculptures in northwestern Indian subcontinent. Now I'd like to start my talk. Since Jules Bartol's excavation in 1920s, Buddhist monastic sites in Had in the Nagaraha region has been famous for stucco sculptures. If someone gets a Buddha head made of stucco in an antiquity market, some scholars may guess that it was unearthed from Had. On the contrary, it is known that there are also several Buddhist monastic sites in other regions where stucco sculptures have been unearthed. For example, excavations at Buddhist monastic sites of Jaurian and Moramoradu in the Takshila region also produced plenty of Buddhist sculptures made of stucco. In addition, in the Gandhara region, there is a Buddhist monastic site where a majority of sculptures unearthed in excavations are made of stucco. The name of the site is Mekhasanda. Today, I'd like to pay attention to this site and try to compare sculptures unearthed in Had sites in the Nagaraha region and Mekhasanda site in the Gandhara region. Mekhasanda is a Buddhist monastic site on a small mountain with the same name in the Gandhara region. It is situated at the northeast corner of Shahbaz Gali, a village located about 10 km east-northeast from Maldan. The famous Ashoka rock edicts located at the south of the village, and the distance between the edicts and Mekhasanda is about 1 kilometer. Can you see my pointer? This is Ashoka inscription, and Mekhasanda is here. Alexander Cunningham visited Shahbaz Gali in 1847 and 1872. He guessed that Mount Mekhasanda is the Mount Danta rock mentioned by Xuanzang, where Siddhartha and his family dwelt and practiced medication in the Vishubhantara Jataka. From 1895 to 1897, Alfred Fouché visited Shahbaz Gali and excavated a part of the Mekhasanda site. He reported the main stupa and small stupas surrounding it. He carried some sculptures unearthed in Mekhasanda to Paris, and one can see some of them in Musée Guimet now. In 1902, a Japanese expedition led by Kozui Otani visited and excavated this site. They detected 9 stupa bases and obtained several dozens of sculptures in their excavations. Excavated sculptures are now stored in Lushu Museum in China. In 1959, an archaeological team led by Seiichi Mizuno in Kyoto University in Japan started archaeological works in Afghanistan and Pakistan. His team visited Mekhasanda in the year 1959, and in 1962 they made archaeological map of the whole ruins over the spur at first and started excavations there. Their work in Mekhasanda continued until 1967 for 3 seasons. Their work revealed the overall view of the Mekhasanda site. It is consisted of stupa court here, and this one is with several stupas and shrines, annex rooms such as assembly halls, dining room, and monastic building scattered on the spur and rock chambers. The main stupa stands in the center of the stupa court, which is surrounded by small votive stupas. Rows of shrines run in the western, northern, and eastern ridge of the stupa court. 9 copper coins were unearthed in the excavations: 1 Kanishka, 1 Fubishka, 1 Vasudeva, 5 later Kushan coins of Vasudeva type, 1 Kushan Sasanian coin were found. According to the chronology of pottery constructed by Dr. Yozo Namba, pottery found in Mekhasanda were contemporary with those belonging to phase 5 and 6 in Raningat monastic site, which means that Mekhasanda was a Buddhist monastic site from around the 3rd century of Common Era to around 6th century. A remarkable point for this site is that the ratio of stucco sculpture is larger than that of stone sculptures. It can be said that Mekhasanda is a Buddhist monastic site whose sculptures were made mainly of stucco. Buddhist monastic sites famous for stucco sculptures are Hadha sites in the Nagaraha region. We know many examples of stucco sculptures unearthed from Hadha sites. And now we have many sculptures made of stucco unearthed in Mekhasanda in the Gandhāran region. The comparison of stucco sculptures unearthed in Hadha sites and Mekhasanda might be helpful to understand artists and artisans of Gandhāran sculptures. Therefore, I'd like to compare stucco sculptures from these sites in different regions. Rendering of hair of Buddha's head might be good viewpoint for comparison. The hair of Buddha's head found in Mekhasanda is rendered with broken and alternating waves. More correctly, front of his hair is rendered with alternating, but side of his hair side of his hair is rendered not with alternating. This characteristic can also be seen in stucco Buddha head unearthed in the main stupa at Tapakaran site in Hadha. On Mekhasanda piece, the alternation continues to his temple, but on the other hand, on Tapakaran piece, alternation can be seen only on front. A stucco Buddha head exhibited in Musée Gime is said to be found in Shabazz Gully, according to its caption. There is a high possibility that this piece was unearthed from Mekhasanda when Alfred Fouché excavated the site in the end of the 19th century. 4. Shahbaz Gali is not a Buddhist monastic site, but an ancient urban site, and its nearby Buddhist monastic site is Mekhasanda. The piece shows this piece shows more broken waves of alternation of hair. The wave of hair is rendered by line engraving. Similar line engraving can be seen in Hadda piece, whose detailed provenance is unknown. There are a lot of Buddha heads whose hair is rendered with dots in Mekhasanda. This type of hair rendering is also seen on seated Buddhas attached to the small stupas in Tapakaran in Hadda, for example, TK121 stupa. At the same time, rendering of drapery on seated Buddha has similar characteristics between Tapakaran in Hadda and Mekhasanda. The depth of engraving is different, but position and direction of lines are similar between these sculptures in different sites. Line and direction, the direction and position are similar. We could see a similarity between stucco sculptures in Hadda and Mekhasanda, not only in the rendering of Buddha figures, but also in that of other figures. For example, a headdress with a crescent at front hair is common between these pieces, Hadda and Mekhasanda. Same hairstyle of female is shared between sculptures found in Hadda and Mekhasanda, as you can see. A headgear on male figure also have similarities. And the rendering on faces of these warriors are almost the same. We may even say that these pieces are made with same hand. One more important point is the way how these sculptures were made. By observing fracture of sculptures, we can know internal structure of sculptures. On this piece from Tapakaran in Hadda, we can easily see 3 layers of stuccos. I did not have access to any analysis apparatus such as X-ray devices when I was a tiny student. So this is just based on my observations. The surface is about 1 millimeter. Under the surface, there is a layer of stucco about 20-meter thickness. I could not have been aware of traces of fabric, which Dr. Monica Lopez-Pratt sharply pointed out yesterday's session. The second layer may be separated more thin layers. In this case, 2 layers. I'm not sure you can see. Here, that I can see. The third layer is a core of sculptures, and the thickness is uneven in order to attach to wall of structures. A stucco of the second and third layer is coarse and at first glance, and the stucco of surface thin layer is fine. On the other hand, in Mekhasanda, this piece has also 3 clear layers of stucco in its inner structure. surface layer is about 2 millimeter in thickness. Under the surface, a layer of stucco with 15 millimeter thickness can be seen. And the third layer is uneven. This one. The thickness is different between regions, but the number of layers are same. On this piece from Mekhasanda, only 2 layers. This is the surface layer, and second layer can be seen, but there is no third layer remained. However, originally it might have one more core layer to attach wall of structures. From these examples, stucco sculptures were made through 3 steps. Firstly, attach the core layer of core stucco material to the structure, like stupa and shrine. Secondly, add a coarse stucco layer to the core and make rough shape of sculpture. Finally, add a surface thin layer with fine stucco material to the sculptures. We can say that the technique of production of stucco sculptures was shared in the Gandhāran region and Nagaraha region. As we noted, Hadha sites are famous for stucco sculptures. However, it is known that stone sculptures were also unearthed in its excavations in Hadha sites. This fact is important, but curiously, it has not been paid attention so far. And stone sculptures were also unearthed in Mekhasanda in the Gandhāran region. Although, as I said, the majority of sculptures were made of stucco in this site. It is worth comparing sculptures made of stone in these sites in different regions too, in order to understand artists and artisans in these regions. For example, these pieces of sculptures from these 2 sites, Hadha and Mekhasanda, represent the scene of horoscope. Similar architectural characteristics, such as pillars and arcade, can be pointed out. Unfortunately, I could not have known the detailed provenance of Hadha schist sculptures from the report. This is another example of iconographical similarities between schist sculptures. On the left panel of Mekhasanda piece, a guardian sitting in front of rampart, and a person riding on a horse is entering the gate of the castle. Next to the guardian, a pillar-like small structure can be seen. On the right panel of the Mekhasanda piece, a woman holding something can be seen. On the other hand, from Hadha, 2 pieces of sculpture which might have been originally a sculpture, originally 1 sculpture are known. On one piece, a standing guardian, a pillar-like structure, and the edge of gate are depicted. And on another piece, back of horseman is depicted. This might show the same scene with Mekhasanda piece. Camels are depicted on sculptures from these sites. These sculptures may represent the scene of offering by 2 merchants, Trapsha and Barika. On these sculptures, relic-like objects on throne is worshipped. The important point is that a majority of sculptures in Mekhasanda were made of stucco, And stone sculptures are neither majority in sculptures unearthed in Hadha sites. We should pay attention to the point that even in these few sculptures, similar scenes were selected among these sites. As we saw, there are similarity between the subject on stone sculptures in Hadha sites and Mekhasanda sites. How about the rendering of sculptures? On some sculptures in Hadha, two pair parallel lines on drapery can be seen. This type of rendering for drapery can also be seen on Mekhasanda pieces. And not only in Mekhasanda, but also in other sites in the Gandhāran region and other regions in the northwestern Indian subcontinent, we can see the two pair parallel lines on drapery. Not only subjects, but also renderings are shared between two regions. We should check the different aspects between sculptures in Hadha. Okay. Maybe, okay, more 3 slides. Hadha and Mekhasanda. I have focused on how the freestanding Buddha or Bodhisattva statues were made. Basically, large standing Buddha and Bodhisattva statues found in Gandhara region were made of 2 pieces of stone. Their right arm are made separately and jointed with several ways. On the other hand, in other regions such as the Swat region, statues were made of one single piece of stone and joint techniques were not used. How about in the Nagaraha region? Only one piece of small Buddha statue with 24 centimeters in height remained is unknown. It cannot be judged whether this single piece had separated arm part or not from a published photo. In the Gandhara region, many large standing figures were made, but in the Nagaraha region, large standing stone sculptures were not made. This is a different point between Gandhara and Nagaraha. Additionally, among Hadha pieces, Hadha ceased sculptures published, there are 2 stone reliefs panels in which a person with Kushan costume is depicted. In the Gandhara region, this type of costumes does not appear on relief panels. This characteristic is rather related to the tradition in the Kapsi sculptures. In Kapsi region, devotees are sometimes rendered with characteristic costume on reliefs. They are thought to be people who actually devoted the relief to the Buddhist monastery. As a conclusion of this paper, we could guess same artists and artisans are engaged in the production of sculptures both in schist and stucco in the Gandhara region and the Nagaraha region. On the other hand, we should not forget that different tendencies can also be seen in these 2 regions. For example, in the Gandhara region, large-size freestanding sculptures were made from separated pieces of stones, but in the Nagaraha region, only small standing statue is known. Persons with the Kushan costume were seen on sculptures in the Nagaraha region, but not on sculptures in the Gandhara region. From the similarities and differences on sculptures, we can guess that there might have been several groups of artists and artisans in the northwestern Indian subcontinent, and the geographical range of activity of each group might have been different and sometimes overlapped. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Satoshi, for your analysis of 2 archaeological sites, Nagaraha and Mekhasanda. looking at the iconographic, typology of iconographies, and also the technique of making stucco sculptures. I think, Monica, you wanted to ask a question if you related to this, and we can continue with the discussion about the analysis. We discussed yesterday and also today with Birgit. So I just opened the floor for the questions. We have 10 minutes.
No, thank you very much for your presentation.
Microphone, please, also for the one online.
Yes, thank you. So thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting. But only one thing concerning stucco sculptures. I think, in my opinion, that we should avoid. I think it will be very difficult because it has a history of naming a stucco sculpture, no? But to say stucco sculptures mean nothing stucco, the word stucco, because could be anything concerning materials. And I think that the sculptures that you showed are not concerning, you said there is not fabric, because you said that you see that there was not fabric between layers. That is, I think, because you have a lime mortar sculpture that you showed were lime mortar sculptures, and in this case I think it was not very necessary to put fabric between the layers, because they are different layers made with mortar, lime mortar, and lime mortar doesn't need, if there is not a core on clay to avoid to see the cracks that appear in the drying process of the clay, there is not need to make a fabric. And I think these kind of sculptures, lime mortar sculptures, are only in the Gandhāran region, and after in India nowadays, or in Nalanda. They don't spread, for example, to northern route of Taklamakan, and it's a more an subcontinent Indian tradition, okay? And in my opinion, and so we only to point out this thing about the name of stucco.
Okay, we don't need to, not necessarily to find look for the trace of fabric.
I think if there is not a core on clay, probably not. I didn't, but
okay, thank you.
We have to continue to study this. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, Jessie.
Thank you, Satoshi. I agree with the parallels that you drew between the two regions. I was wondering whether there were any plans to carry out a petrographic analysis of the material from Mekhasanda, because if I remember from the analysis carried out on the material that is in the Musée Guimet, Cambon indicated that the type of schist was that of the Peshawar basin, which would indicate that the stone would be imported. And so can you say a bit more about the type of schist from Mekhasanda, or not at all? And the other thing is, in the collection, we have some material from Bambolai in not stucco, which I have it's not a material that I'm familiar with, so I invite you to look at or Alexandra.
I'm sorry, first question, I cannot understand.
The schist in Mekhasanda, I think I remember that the material from the Musée Guimet was analyzed, and that the type of schist was from Peshawar region, as opposed to, I don't know, Swat or whatever. And so not local, basically. And to solidify, reinforce your conclusion, which I agree with, it would be interesting to check the type of schist that is used to carve out.
Mekhasanda is here, in Peshawar Basin. And you mean Nagaraha piece? You mean cyst were imported from Peshawar.
That's what
Cambon.
But but the type of schist within the Peshawar basin can vary as well depending on the query. So in order to confirm the direct link which you seem to establish between Hadda and Mekhasanda, it would be interesting to analyze the schist in Mekhasanda, which would be expensive.
Thank you.
Thank you, Satoshi, for the this very interesting presentation of the striking resemblances between Mekhasanda and Had. And I have a little question about the datation. If I remember well, you explained Mekhasanda was considered as contemporary as Ranigat 3 or 6. I don't remember very well. And can we is this established that the modelings come from this period too? Thank you.
I'm sorry, the date of construction, and you want to know? No.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I need more time if I correctly explain the date of this site. But shortly, in Ranigat, Japanese mission excavated in 1980s to 1990s. At that time, they constructed a pottery, chronology of pottery. According to that, and Ranigat is how to say a very long period sites, and according to that, Mekhasanda is about contemporary with the 3rd century of CE, and the date of decline is not clear, but maybe middle of the 6th century, this site was abolished. Yes.
I just wanted to make a comment about what Monica said about the existence of lime mortar. I mean, this is very, very important to take into consideration, and also what Jesse said about the schist coming from the Peshawar area. Recently, unfortunately, in Afghanistan, because of the destruction of Paithawa and Shotorak, many sculptures appeared in the market, which I could see, and these sculptures are unfinished. I mean, this is what normally happened in the ancient period. To limit the weight of the stone, they do remove some parts, but leave the basic idea. So that was finished in situ when it was fixed in the site. So these sculptures surfaced in recent years, unfortunately, after the Soviet army left Afghanistan, and they appeared in the market, especially from Paithawa and Shotorak. Some of them I already published. So it's very important to have a look at them as well. Same thing applies to, as I said to Vidagi yesterday, regarding some schist sculptures which were found in Messina. Right. Okay, thank you very much, Satoshi, for this thought-provoking.
Thank you very much.
So I have the great pleasure of introducing Dr. Lopez. Normally the paper should have been presented with my good friend Professor Gilstein. I have been following your work with Olivier, the work that you have done in Kabul those days, doing the cartography on one side with the Chicago Near Eastern, Department of Near Eastern Studies, and also the database you did there on the Hadha material,
yes.
Staying in play, situ, and doing this wonderful work, which brought a lot of information to us about all these sites dispersed in Afghanistan. So when I went to Chicago to the conference that Stein organized, I said what Strabo said in his work, that the Bactria was the land of 1,000 cities. Mm-hmm. With all the satellite photographs, American Air Force photographs, aerial photographs, now we see hundreds and hundreds of sites there. And at the same time, Dr. Lopez has done a wonderful work of the database, looking at the Hadha material from 2017 to 2022. Unfortunately, the project came to for the evidence political reasons. So we are really looking forward to your paper.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's it. Yeah, it's on. Yes. Professor is saying this paper, first of all, I want to say thank you to the organizers for this wonderful colloquium, especially Alexandra. Thank you so much. As Professor was saying, this is part of a group effort project in which we participate, not only myself, but also, of course, Professor GilSTEIN. And I like to mention other members of the team, such as the conservators, Fabio Colombo and Elisa Panunzio, Giuseppe Salemi, art historian Alice Casalini, and of course our Afghan colleagues as well that we work with in Kabul. This NMA-ISAC, which stands for National Museum of Afghanistan, Institute of Study of the Ancient Cultures, had a project. It's part of the broad spectrum of more different projects, such as the SCHMIDT, the satellite mapping of Afghanistan. But mainly, it was born after our first project in Afghanistan, which in 2012, it was the digital inventory, the full holdings, or the holdings of the Museum of the National Museum, which we started through a memorandum of understanding with the museum, and the main goal was to create the first full digital inventory of the surviving holdings of the museum, including the early Buddhist collections of such important sites such as Hadha. Bearing in mind that the estimations up to 70% of the objects from the museums were damaged or destroyed, and up to 90% of the written records were also destroyed, it was very important to perform or to carry out this inventory to guarantee the preservation through a principle that we like to call preservation through documentation. During this process, every object was inventoried, described, photographed, treated, and rehoused in acid-free archival material. You can see here the process of the inventory. This is the image of the destroyed records and the process of the inventory carried out with our Afghan colleagues in the museum. The inventory project, the project of the inventory set the ground for further projects, further collaborations, and sideways avenues to do other projects, such as the Mobile Museum Outreach Project, which is was a beautiful project. It was a large-scale educational program designed to bring the museum closer to those students that couldn't go to the museum in Kabul, and we did that in Kabul and 5 other provinces. You can see the image there. And of course, the project that occupies today the presentation, that's the main reason for being here, which is the Hadha Sculptural Project, which was aimed to restore, conserve, and preserve part of the Hadha collection, mainly stuck sculpture, damaged or partially destroyed by Taliban in 2001. And you can see the image and also there. Well, we know that the National Museum of Afghanistan is the main repository for the history of Afghanistan from prehistoric times to Islamic and modern times, and is the main place, therefore, to study and understand the significance of the Hadha collection, along, of course, with other museums such as the Museum. This is why the study of Hadha collection in Afghanistan is of paramount importance, and where we convene that the study of the partially destroyed objects or subset of the Hadha collection was crucial as to understand the collection in a more global approach. So we have here the image of the distribution of the Hadha objects throughout the museums around the world. Of course, the 2 main repositories, the National Museum of Afghanistan and the Museum. From the very beginning of the project, we started asking ourselves questions that could be answered through the understanding of these fragmentary stucco sculptures, such as how many objects were part of the Hadha collection originally, how many sculptures were damaged during the Civil War and in 2001, and what percentage of the partial sculptures could be identified through surviving old records, photographs, and archaeological reports. The main goals of the project were, first, cleaning, stabilizing, and restoring as many sculptures fragments as possible, and understanding the full extent of the Hadha collection in some specific topics as well, such as the construction techniques for the stucco Hadha, the stylistic variations of the sculptures, and their spatial distribution of the sculptures in each monastery within Hadha. The first phase of the project we see here was carried out in 2017, when the team focused in sorting, organizing, and documenting the surviving fragments and storing them in asset-free archival material. The work started in the basements where the fragments were stored, and then we started sorting them out, classifying them, and storing them in acid-free material. And then, we estimate more than 7,000 fragments were moved from the basement of the museum that we saw to the museum conservation laboratory, which we have here in the image. They were organized there by type and feature. Each fragment was individually stabilized, treated, and carefully studied. Chemical analysis, which results are not included in the presentation, but I'm open to discuss later, were performed in some stucco samples as to understand the nature and its nature, and to find out what would be the best treatment for this type of stucco. The study of every individual piece also enabled us to find the first evidence to identify partial objects. Apart from the physical appearance and its comparisons to all photographs and catalogs, we found inventory numbers, which we see later, written in fragments, even in some of the the smallest pieces, they have numbers that give us clue as to identify to all records. So this is the work. This is the work in the conservation lab. And this, of course, the using the microscope, performing the first treatments, and then the organization or laid out in tables, which have the graphic here. And they were sorted by actually by types as well. And of course, the most predominant were seated Buddhas, standing Buddhas, and of course, Buddha heads. On this first phase, when this first phase of the treatment was finished between 2018 and 2020, we proceeded to try to reassemble, which was the main final goal of the project, the very fragmentary stucco objects. And in order to do so, the fragments were, as we saw, were laid onto the tables, organized by types we have here, and try to find the first matches between the fragments. And the nature of the groups in which we organized the tables were related to the feature of the fragment, and therefore the main groups were, as I said, standing Buddhas, seated Buddhas, but also other figurative representations such as demons, atlases, devotees, soldiers, and architectural fragments. During these years, 2017, 2020, major progress was done in putting together many of the fragments that we identified as being part of the same sculptures. But the help we had for that, or the first references we have for that, was the pre-existing or pre-war catalogs, such as Francine Tissot, and of course the reports by archaeological reports and publications from the Fouillet de Hadha by Jules Barthou. We have here some of the sources, and we see here, apart from Barthou publications and Tissot publications, that we have something that it was a turning point in our investigation, in our work, which the finding or the gaining access to a group of old inventory cards that were surviving in the museum, with all inventory numbers, both from also photographs from not only from Barthou and Fouché excavations, but also from Mosamindi and Darcy excavations, that allow us to identify the first sculptures and to make sure that the fragments we're analyzing belong to a specific specific and previously inventoried sculpture. We have here an image of how we use these photographs in order to do so, even with the smallest fragments, as we see it here. We see the number, and we could tell that belong probably the arm of this sculpture. Thanks to the cards, also we were able to see the before and after of the reassembled sculptures, how they look, and confirm that these were objects that looked like that before. And also we had the possibility to have an estimation of how many sculptures we could identify within the collections and how many we thought were absolutely lost. In 2020, once we were able to identify individual sculptures, we assigned them a new inventory number and registered them into a specific database, a conservation database, following the principle of the inventory, previous inventory, the inventory that we had in the National Museum of Afghanistan. Was intended to record every assigned sculptural unit that we call, that's the unit that we use, that's PRS, partial resembled sculpture. And this is the dedicated conservation database, which information about the conservation treatment and features of the fragments treated. Apart from this crucial type of information or documentation, we also integrated new technology in the study of the fragments, such as 3D scanning. Thanks to Professor Salemi, we were able to scan some of the fragments, an array of sample, and a group of sculptures to have an idea of how this methodology will work in understanding the nature of the sculptures. We could, right here. The scan of this selected array of sculptures have enabled us to understand the nature of the breaks of the sculptures, the inner stratigraphy, thus identifying the layers of stucco and techniques used in the construction of the sculptures. Besides the 3D scans and its rendering, it can go further and beyond, and can be used in recreations and in developing methods to assemble different fragments belonging to the same sculpture, using algorithms. And these are two areas where the Had sculpture has enormous potential still. The understanding of the building techniques of the stucco sculpture and the location of the sculptures, also thanks to the all inventory cards, in different sites within Had, in its original location context inside in Had. Regarding the construction of sculptures, we talked about yesterday about the vegetal binders, I think, and we have here an example of that. Regarding the construction of sculptures, the Sacher collection has provided an invaluable amount of information to its fragmentary state. Probably, with a more complete state of the sculpture, we wouldn't be able to see inside to understand properly the composition of the sculptures. Our conservators, Fabio Colombo and Elisa Panunzio, were able to reconstruct the different phases and techniques used in the stucco sculptures from Had. In order to do so, of course, they compare it and they cross-check it with information obtained with the broken fragments, with the photographic documentation of the sculptures, the intact sculptures that they studied in situ in the museum, and the texts and theories of archaeologists that have previously worked with the Had material or similar objects from the Gandhāran region. In this regard, of course, we would like to acknowledge the great contribution by Professor Tarsi, whose work in Had has been crucial for the understanding of early Buddhism in Afghanistan and the Gandhara region, and also in the reconstruction steps in the building of Had sculptures. Most of the sculptures from the Had collection are high relief, meaning that the sculptures were not meant to stand alone. They're part of an architectural context to which they're attached. Some of them, included here in our analysis, present traces of what it seems to be part of the preparation of the architectural features right before adding the sculpture, such as the vegetal fibers imprints at the back of decorative elements that we see in the screen. Other architectural elements, such as columns, pillars, or brackets, have marks of their supporting elements in the back, such as dowels, nails, and pegs. We documented here, or I'm presenting here just, of course, a brief overview of all the information we obtained, but of course there's much more in the process, so it's a simplified walk through the stages of construction of the sculptures. But I think we have here examples that really represent this very well, these stages. Here we have another stage, another part or example of preparation, which is the defining of the shape of the sculpture that will go into the architectural motif here. And we were able to, Fabio and Elisa were able to determine that it was the layout, probably a drawing, or we know that there's limited space and there's a small room for improvisation when you have an iconographic program. So probably there was a previous work of delimiting the space for the sculpture. And we can see it here. Another aspect of the construction of the sculpture, and we have seen that here in many examples. Monica has talked about it, Julia. It's the armature, and we've seen it also with Birgit, the armature or skeleton of the sculpture. And thanks to the 3D scan, we were able to determine also the probably what it would like the skeleton applied to one of the other sculptures, which is standing Buddha that we have here in the image. As we saw, the supporting structure is composed of palm sticks used to create a skeleton or armature of the sculpture, a technique that was saying is also used in clay sculptures. The 3D scan also allows us to notice another technique used in the construction of production of sculptures, which is the technique of stick and bundles for the heads. And actually, we found in the collection a very fragmentary object that it seems to be the imprint of this stick and bundle that will go inside the head of a Buddha. And we can see also the imprints in the photograph here. Again, the 3D scan gave us more light on this, on recognizing these techniques used in the sculptures. The second factor, there was a second aspect of the, as many that we have in the Hadha Sculptural Project, and there's many avenues and ways in which we can work, and many information that can be obtained from that, is the trying to locate or to establish the context for some of the sculptures that we don't know, or we were not sure about the context. For that we use, again, Francis Tissot, that has a reference, but of course the main source was, again, the archaeological reports by Jules Barthou. And thanks to that, we were able to define or to estimate the distribution of sculptures in the monasteries. So that's just, it's actually very initial work, but I think will be interesting. And I think, for instance, other collections in the world could do that, and we could have a complete reconstruction of the appearance of the monasteries with the original context of the sculpture. Sometimes it's very difficult to trace that back, but for the ones that we have more or less sure context, we can do that, and we can recreate the original image of the monastery back then. Well, this was just an overview of the project. Many results are to come, and we hope that the public, the publication of all this work will come sometime soon, and they will be available for everybody. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for this fascinating paper. I wish Semar Tarsi was here in the audience to see that the work that you have been doing. I have to say that I have a karmic connection with Afghanistan. I went to Afghanistan just after the 9/11, 2002, sent by UNESCO to write a report on the coins in the gallery. So it was very easy to do because there wasn't a single coin left. More than 30,000 coins from Mirzaka and other places, apart from the gold and silver coins found in the Bank of Kabul. All the others were left, and I saw the museum in this state. The first photographs you showed me. It was really a painful experience for me, the first visit. And also, Semar Tarsi was there in 2002. That's the first time he came to Afghanistan after leaving Afghanistan during the Soviet invasion. And then Nader Rasuli and Masudi, we were all working together. It's really wonderful, and I'm very happy that Professor Henri Paul Frankfurt is here. I mean, he's from the very beginning with Paul Bernard, you worked with the DAFA, French archaeological delegation in Afghanistan. Olivier was there for about 3 years, working with the same team, first invited by GilSTEIN. So it's a really wonderful work that you have been doing in Afghanistan, and we are really looking forward to see the publications. So we can go for another 10 minutes for questions and answers. Yeah, please. Yeah, Olivier.
Yes, thank you, Alejandro, for the presentation of this obviously wonderful project. I'm really admiring the work you've done, and I will also emphasize the fact that Professor Tarsi is directly and indirectly connected to the project because some of his former students actually worked on it. So Catherine Haim, who's now working for UNESCO in Jordan, she worked on the project for several years, and I myself just the 1 year, not 3. It was just the 1 year. So yes, I'm sorry. I want to ask a very difficult question about the original database and how soon is soon. Do you have any idea of the calendar of how it might be put online, even partially?
No, not at all.
Possibly, yeah, because obviously, given the context, this is awfully important, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah, but we don't have that info. I mean, I don't know. I couldn't say.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for your interesting presentation and for your work did in the Kabul Museum. So I want to ask you if you said that you did analysis of the materials, and I will ask about if the stucco sculptures were lime mortar mainly.
Yeah. Yes, and I have to look into that, but I can provide more information about the analysis results. Yeah.
Yes, because this is important for the point of view of technique. If it was lime mortar or gypsum plaster.
There was gypsum as well. We know that, but it was mainly. I think if I remember correctly, it was mainly lime mortar.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I was very impressed by your work, and it's very important. I visited Hadda several times, and much more the Kabul Museum. And just on one little point, your use of scanning and 3D is extremely important, especially because it is technical and practical. Usually, and we saw that in other areas of destructions of cultural heritage and antiquities, some people in our countries have a tendency to consider that scanning virtual images are replacing completely the originals and the size, but it is not at all like that. So many data, so many informations and impressions can be get from the originals that we have to praise your work on the original and your consistent and clever use of 3D scanning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Microphone.
Thank you so much, Alejandro, for this wonderful presentation. I remember when I was at the museum and we started the database, and then we work on this HADA project, but later I left the museum and went to the archaeology department. But I remember how difficult it was to start the work with your team. I know it was a very difficult work because these fragments were not easy to identify and to find the correct pieces for these specific objects. It was in a big boxes. Can you explain a little bit about the numberings, the fragments that you said that we have the numberings like Vajrapani's head, Bodhisattvas, like these 10, how you number this? I mean, there are some fragments which are very small. Probably this was part of the head of a Bodhisattva or a fragment, but there was no numbers and it couldn't match any objects there. So how you number this? As you mentioned here, I think you said around 200 objects you have identified with this.
Well, actually, we identify around 300. In the realm of 350, but it was a mixture, as you know. We have all kinds of fragments, from very small fragments that you couldn't tell what it was really. I mean, if you have an expert eye, yes, and some bigger fragments that of course, a bodhisattva is the head of a Buddha. But then we had the numbering system, the all inventory. They have these kind of clues that we had, like the numbers, all inventory numbers written on the back, or partially written on top. And we went through all that, and of course, some of the very small fragments we say, it's a standing Buddha. How do you know it's a standing Buddha? It's a very small fragment. But we compared that to the old photographs, and we know it's a standing Buddha, or it's part of a standing Buddha. But yeah, it was a very hard process, like, as you all know, Fahim knows as well, that we started, we like to call it as a big jigsaw puzzle, right? That we had without the cover on the box. You don't know what it looked like until we have some of the photographs in the publications. It was very hard to make a sense of how many sculptures, how we put them together, what they're representing, other part of the same group, and then we started to make sense of them. Also, the work by Elisa, for Fabio Colombo and Elisa Panuncio was amazing, because even before having those sources, they started matching, bearing in mind the type of stucco, the type of finishing layer, pigments, and that was also very painstaking work. So, yeah, it was a combination. I think it was a very gradual evolution since we started in 2017. Actually, we were trying to make sense of how many pieces we have, what were the pieces that we have, and then we started discovering, okay, we can put some of them together. When we assemble some of them, reassemble virtually other of them, we can have a good idea of at least a big group of them, what they were representing and what they were, and link them to the old inventory cards, also part 2 publications. So that was, it was a long process. And of course, it was more to be done, but unfortunately, we have to stop the project. But of course, I think it was a project that could keep ongoing for many, many years.
Okay, thank you. The last question. Thank you for your report. I want to check the collection number over the Tokyo Museum. If you remember, you can check about the 1957. The France Jimmy Museum exchanged 36 projects to the Tokyo Museum, including the 8 Hada sculptures. And if you remember, the father, the archaeologist Joseph Hagin, working at Japan, he sent 3 Hada sculptures to Kyoto University. I think remember maybe something you can check. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you for letting me know. Yeah.
Just before I finish, since you referred to the book by Francine Tissot, I mean, she was my spiritual mother. I can remember when she wrote the catalogue, she was 88 years old. So I worked with her for 1 year with this old Macintosh. And every time, it broke down, so I have to go and repair it. So it was a huge attempt she did, despite her age. So one day I got a telephone call at 3 o'clock in the morning from Francine saying that my computer is broken. I said, Francine, you know what time is it? I don't know, but I had my breakfast. So I have to go at 6 o'clock and repair the Macintosh. So everything related to Afghanistan has really, really beautiful stories. Those who are dedicated entirely, I mean, including Tarsi, Bartu, and French archaeological delegation, you, Olivier, and also I'm sure you will talk about it. So it's a wonderful experience of working in Afghanistan with all the difficult conditions, and I salute all my Afghan colleagues who have done a lot of work during difficult times.
Yeah, I would like to also to acknowledge, they're here. So the hard work and collaboration with Nouraga, with Fahim Rahimi, with all of Afghan colleagues, without them, of course, this would have been possible. I mean, it was a collaborative work, and they were part of it as well.
Okay, thank you very much. We go for the coffee break.
Oh yeah, you are.
جاب خراب میشه دیگه امین
Ah, c'est pas vraiment de toute façon. Tu veux encore faire des modifications après, je pense. Ouais, en fonction de ce qui a été dit. Tu vas faire plus de temps que prévu? C'est lequel, tu vois? Ouais, tu peux supprimer. Ouais. Ok, super. Non, je sais pas. En fait, je ne sais pas où il est sur le drap. Je vais t'écouter avec plaisir. Ouais. Mais long. Attends, juste un instant. Comment je fais pour... Attendez, je te le dis après.
Well, I used to formatting, sorry.
In the laptop.
Attends, je te laisse.
Alors. Do you have a USB or something? I can. Yeah, it will be better. Oh, ok, super. Okay, so I will put it. Let's just check that everything is good. Perfect. Okay, so all good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Ooh, a lot of PowerPoint. Yeah, that's why I'm afraid I couldn't finish. Yeah, but
okay.
Yeah, the color is different. But is that okay if it's in?
Yes, you can just make a diaporama here, and à partir du début.
Try it.
Yeah, if you want to try, you can. I think it looks good.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I'm nervous.
Don't worry. Thank you.
Alex.
T'as trouvé?
Ah, super.
Je sais pas. Alors, elle a pas le temps déjà, elle trouvait pas son badge.
Non, mais en plus.
Pardon? Je sais plus. Je me pose la question. Monica, c'est bon. Attends, il y a qui d'autre qui doit passer cet après-midi?
That's